government workers should not be allowed to vote. This is the second in a series of how to shrink the federal, state, and local governments. This one will focus on the idea that government workers should not vote and explain why they should not vote. Now, the first in the series is how government workers should not pay taxes. If you'd like to see that one, and I encourage you to do so because it's the first of this series, here's a link to it. In this video, I talk about why government workers should not vote. And it's very simple. They're benefiting from tax money. Allowing government workers to vote, you're allowing them to vote for politicians who will then, surprise, surprise, have control over how much they're paid. These individuals who work for government already have basically said they're all fine with big government. I mean, that's how they got employed. A lot of them then rationalize on how taxation is somehow good, that it's not theft. They get very upset when you point out that taxation is theft. And if you're one of those that thinks that taxation is not theft, you haven't thought about it. If you refuse to pay your taxes, government will come after you. If you put up resistance, government will take force against you, up to and including deadly force. They will confiscate your house, your wages, your car, everything you own, and throw you into prison as an example so that others don't dare refuse to pay their taxes. That's using the guns of the state to get people to pay taxes. That's why taxation is not voluntary, and that's why taxation is thus involuntary and thus theft. Now, if you work for government, you have a vested interest in the politicians that get elected to government. And I would call it a conflict of interest. You want more government because more government means more money for you. It just goes hands in hand. And if you're already okay with working for big government, you're already okay with big government in and of itself. So you have a section of the population who is being employed by government, who gets to vote in general elections for politicians, who then determine how big that government is going to be, how much money it taxes the general public, how much money their budgets are. It is truly a conflict of interest. Now, there's going to be people who are going to say, well, that's undemocratic, that's wrong. You're taking away their right to vote. Yes, I am advocating that. But I'm not taking their right to vote away permanently. It's just a deal that's made with them. If you want to have a government paycheck, you give up your right to vote. You give up your right to elect the people who determine how much your paycheck will be. It's just that simple. And this is not unheard of taking away rights of government workers. I was in the military. I think a lot of the general public does not understand that the Constitution does not apply to soldiers. The Constitution is for civilians only. Soldiers, they have what's called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And that's what determines their rights. Soldiers, when you become a soldier, you give up lots of rights that you as a citizen possess. You give up the right to free speech. You give up the right to a free press. You give up the right to assembly. In fact, you give up rights that the civilians don't even realize are kind of rights, like such as the right to determine what job you work. In the private sector, if you don't want to work a job, you can quit it. I mean, you might not have another job to replace it, but you have that luxury. You can go and say, oh, I want to try this other job over here. I'll give that a try. You see this with young people. They switch between jobs a lot of times. They work in the food industry and then find out, oh my God, that's too high pressure, too much stress. Not for me. And so they quit. I mean, they quit without even giving away their 2 weeks notice. They just don't show up. But in the military, you don't have that luxury. When you're going to the military, you're given an aptitude test. And largely based on that aptitude test, what jobs you can do in the military are restricted. I did really, really well on aptitude tests. One of the jobs I could have gone for was a communication specialist. I love that title. It's actually you're a cipher, okay? But they don't like saying those terms. I had lots of different options placed before me. And when I was being talked to essentially the job counselor at the military, I actually had an officer from the communications division or whatever come over and really pitch me to do that. Now I instead went into being a survival instructor, stupidly. I'm pretty much allergic to nature for a large part. And why I did that, I was 18 years old and I had an older brother and he was a survival instructor of the year. And he basically got the recruiters to come down to get me. So I went into that. But I had lots of job possibilities. And they were strongly encouraging me to go on a certain one. In my same barracks, there was someone who I told of all these job offers that I was receiving. Got really upset and stormed out of the room. I was just excited. Wow, look at all these jobs, laying out all the sheets and, which one should I take? I'm 18 years old and excited about the opportunities. Even though I knew my brother was having recruiters from survival coming on down to get me, I was still interested to see it. Well, another member of my barracks said, that guy is going to go into security. And I don't know if you understand this about the military, but in the U.S. Air Force, which I was a member of, basically if you can't do any job, they throw you into security. You're standing out in the middle of an airfield with a M16. It's kind of, if your aptitude scores are so bad, it's about the only job that you can do. And that's why he got upset. Now, I'm just saying this because the soldiers, I was once, and them, we didn't have all these options. The aptitude test determined what the military felt that you would be best at. I was a rare example. I did very well in the aptitude test. That other soldier in my barrack did really poorly, and he had become a security officer. I mean, it's not a cop, you understand. It's just literally a security guard. So you, as a civilian, you have freedom to choose what job you want to do. Even if you're not qualified for the job, you can still apply for it. In the military, you don't have that. So it's already been established in government that they can take away your constitutional rights. I'm saying that if you work in government, you should not be allowed to vote. And this is a choice you make. This is something that when you're applying for a government job, government should make very clear to you that if you take this government job, you relinquish your right to vote for as long as you remain employed by government. The vast majority of government workers are Democrats. That should surprise no one. The Democrat Party is for big government. Now, some people might say, well, military typically votes Republican. Yes, but there's a kind of a caveat on there. They vote Republican because Republicans are pro-military spending. It's just they're in favor of big government in just a different way. And so it's not like the soldiers want to reduce government. They may, all other aspects of government, but not the military. They want to have a strong United States military. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with how strong it is. We spend more on our military than the next 10 countries combined. We are the only world superpower. I think we can cut back on that. But because soldiers do vote, they are a voting bloc that for politicians to get elected, they got to give at least lip service to, and they got to do votes for if they actually want to, really gain their support. And this is a problem. Just like with our parts of government, they're mainly just in favor of big government. If we remove these government workers' right to vote, essentially we're getting more of the true taxpayers voting in the election, not people who have a conflict of interest voting. I mean, to give you a kind of an analogy, right now, because we allow government workers to vote, it's like if you went to a restaurant and when it came time for you to determine what the tip should be, your waitress got to sit down and have an equal say in how much her tip should be. Gosh, I wonder if she's gonna say that maybe you should spend less on the tip. No, she's gonna want you to spend more, a lot more. She'll probably be voting for 100% tip or more. And that's what we have right now. That's one of the problems we have by having government workers being able to vote. They are in favor of big government. They want to increase their salaries. Government politicians who promise them more government spending, they're kind of like buying votes from these government workers. Not kind of, they are buying votes from these government workers. But if we took these government workers out of the voting population, now we have people who are not going to have a direct benefit coming from government, a wage, a salary, but are actually just paying taxes. There are others that I believe should have their voting rights suspended, and I'll cover them in later videos in this series. But this is a good start. If you're a full-time or part-time government worker, as part of the condition for your employment, you give up the right to vote. You do not get to sit down at the table and determine your tip. And that's what we need to do. Only by restricting these government workers from voting can we start having more voters voting to reduce government. It is really that simple. I know government workers are going to scream and complain. I know Democrats are going to scream and complain because the vast majority of government workers vote Democratic. But I think in states that allow statewide referendums, this can be started. And this is something that those states can lead the nation in that aspect. Because also you have to understand, once they do that, then that has ramifications throughout their state and their local government. It has ramifications throughout their society, that's the society of that state, and that will influence the federal politicians, so that you could eventually get, say, a Republican president and a Republican Congress to pass a law that just removes the voting right. Now, it might require a constitutional amendment. So be it. It should be done. But as long as we allow people who directly benefit from government to have a vote, they're having influence on how big government will be. And their incentive is obviously to increase as much as they can, even if they're soldiers, to increase military spending. So this is something to think about. If you know of a state taxpayer organization in a state that allows statewide referendums, please send them a link of this video to them and suggest they look into this idea. If you are a state taxpayers organization, please contact me. My email address is on my About page when you go to my home page for this YouTube channel. Just click on my name next to my photograph that is below this video. This is something that we can start doing. This is a constructive way for us to start reducing government, and that's by getting people who have a conflict of interest out of the voting block. Now, if this is your first time you've been watching one of my videos, or you've watched them enough times and you're thinking that I'm doing a good job, please subscribe to this channel. I post videos sometimes when news breaks, sometimes I post more than one video a day. Because of that, if you'd like to be notified when a new video comes out, when subscribing to my channel, to the left of the subscribe button is a bell icon. Click on it and you can pick between text and email notification. Also, I have a mailing list, and when that gets to 100 subscribers, I'll start producing a weekly unlisted video where I reply to comments posted to last week's batch of public videos. If you'd like to receive those, reply to comment videos, in the description below is a link to the mailing list sign-up form. Please subscribe. Thank you. See you tomorrow when I'll do another part of this series. Bye.